Everyone, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order and welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene School District Board meeting for September 14th, 2020. Gentlemen, please remove your hats, and everyone, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you for being here with us tonight, either in person or online. My name's Casey Morrisroe, and I'm the board chair, and I'll be conducting tonight's meeting. Just real quick, I'll introduce our participants up front. To my far right is Miss Rebecca Smith, trustee, and Miss Lisa May, trustee. Sitting behind them is Lynn Town, our board clerk. To my left is Jennifer Brumley, our vice chair, and Tambra Pickford, trustee. And then off to Tambra's left is Dr. Steve Cook, our superintendent. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of the meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting. Instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted in writing through the clerk. Okay. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Town. Okay. Excited to have board recognition back on our agenda. It's been a few months, maybe 6 months since we've done that. So, Dr. Cook, are you starting with this? Okay. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so before we start and recognize those that we want to appreciate tonight, I want to take just a second for a quick video on the finish of our Nexa school. So I'm super excited to talk about this today. A year ago, actually, this goes back, I think the very first conversation about a new school, new elementary school, was in 2017. Is that correct? When it was, the bond was passed and all of that stuff started happening. And then to have the budget push forward and say, oh, by the way, build that during a global pandemic, come in on time and on budget. That accomplishment is beyond scale, and I'm not sure there's much that we can do to truly appreciate and acknowledge the effort that went out to do that. So we just want to take an opportunity just briefly to recognize all the players that had something to do with that. So I'm going to, well, first of all, I'm going to hand out these awards. And here's a good example of what, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but I'll just tell you what one says. The Coeur d'Alene Public School Board of Trustees offers up this Superstar Award in recognition of your time, talent, contribution to the design and construction of the new home of Northwest Expeditionary Academy, our new elementary school opening September 2020. And so I'm just going to grab these and get them all delivered to those folks. And I would love for either maybe John or Scott, if one of you guys might be willing to say a few words. And then we didn't expect to have Rich here. Rich, we're super excited Rich is here. So we might even have Rich talk about how hard it was to get all the stuff to pull this off. And you guys can talk about that. So first off, Scott Fisher. John Mueller. You got it. Brandon Hendewerk. Did I say Brandon's last name right? Okay. He couldn't make it. All right. I'm going to give you his too. Actually, that'll work better. Matt Gray. So, thank you. And Rich Wells is getting Brandon's certificate. So, thank you, Rich. Thank you. Also, just a quick shout out to Geno Construction. They've been a fantastic partner through this, and we're just very, very grateful for your guys' commitment to the work for us. All right, now for our folks, too, that had something to do with this, Mike Westrup. Thanks, Mike. All right. Believe it or not, Brian Martin. He couldn't be here tonight. I'm sure he's hunting. Bill Rutherford, principal at Nexa. Bill couldn't make it tonight either. And last but not least, Jeff Voller. We're so proud of Jeff's work too. So we're going to get you guys outside and get a photo here in just a second, but I would love to have either Scott or Rich or John, any of you guys want to talk about this. This, just to pull this off is just, I'm not kidding, it's amazing.
Well, thank you. Dr. Cook mentioned the length of time we've all been working on this, and I was a young man when we started. Mine was not gray? Okay, you don't believe that. I'd just like to have a big shout out to the school district for giving us the opportunity. And just to tell you how thrilled we are at Architects West to be able to be a part of your school systems and these kind of projects. I know I can tell you, I've stood before you over the last 3 years and told you, we got to get going, prices are escalating, blah, 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 blah. But I can't tell you how excited it feels to be on the other side of this now. So great job. And then I just really want to give a shout out to Geno, particularly to Brandon, who can't be here. I sincerely believe that given all that we've been through in the last 13 months, that there is nobody else who could have pulled this off. Combination of a great company backed up by somebody in both Matt and Brandon that really had a passion for getting this done for our kids and our district. And they both have put in untold hours to get this thing done. And the amount of work that got done in the last 2 months to finish this thing up is nothing short of phenomenal. And so I am so proud and happy to have been able to be a part of it with you guys. I just can't express that enough. John, the site just looks exquisite. Thank you for that. And for everybody at the school district who was involved all the way through, it's really been one of those kind of projects where everything comes together, everybody works as a team, and I think the results speak for themselves. So thank you.
Matt or Rich, can we get one of you guys to say something? Matt?
Thank you, sir. Kind of second up Scott's comments here. It has been a phenomenal experience. I do want to thank the school district. You've been a wonderful client, and I've made lots of friends in the school district in addition to this job and previous projects as well. Jeff, Mike, it's been phenomenal working with you. Thank you for partnering with us through this. We've had a lot of challenges, some hiccups, and some hang-ups, but we have pushed through. It has been very successful. The design team, Architects West, again, another fantastic endeavor together. So I appreciate that partnership as well. And honestly, this is the medallion as far as my career is concerned. This was no easy feat, and the partnership here was incredible. I mean, absolutely top notch. So I give credit to the entire team. It's not just Gino. We built it, but it's the design team, ownership. This was a team effort, so I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it, Matt. Yeah, all right, that's it for board recognition. Thank you. Scott, did you want to grab these guys and get a photo outside and we get them?
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you coming down here tonight. And again, job well done. So thank you. Okay, we had no board comments on the agenda tonight, so we'll move to the CEA report. And I believe we have Kim Ziegler is going to join us through our Zoom link, I think, here in just a second. Sorry, Seth. Kim, once we get you up there, welcome. Thanks for joining us on your first day with students.
Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Perfect. Starting to sound like the Sprint guy. Can you hear me now? Yeah, today was our first day with students. It was absolutely wonderful to be back in the classroom. And I'm very happy to be back here joining you guys this evening. Thank you, Board Chair Morrisroe, esteemed members of the board, Superintendent Cook, district employees, and the public for having me. As we make our way back into school, I want to start with a thank you. Thank you so much for starting our school year in the phase of orange of our reopening plan. Orange promotes safety for students and educators, as well as the many other people that work in our buildings. This also gave our educators the best opportunity to prepare for their students. And on that note, I had many teachers this week and counselors share that they appreciated the extra week of planning that was provided by you to us. With the students beginning today on the 14th, rather than last Monday, we were able to work hard to train in Schoology. My cat has decided to join us, I'm sorry. We were able to work hard in Schoology, set up our classes online as well as in person, and prepare to create memorable moments in our first month of school. Allowing us to begin a little bit later also promotes more safety for our students and the adults, instructional quality, and clear communication with our families. Today, as we began school like we've never began it before, one thing was certain: our safety was of top consideration. Thank you again for having me this evening. All year long, I plan on bringing you success stories from our school year as we move forward. Sorry about my cat.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And have a great year. Okay, we'll see you next month. All right, let's move on to public comment. Ed, okay. No one signed up for public comment tonight. So we'll move into our consent agenda. And I've been asked to separate it out. So we'll go with consent agenda item A and then B through I. So is there a motion to approve consent agenda item A?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I abstain, Lynn.
Okay, Ms. Brumley has abstained. Motion carries. And is there a motion to approve consent agenda items B through I?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries, Ms. Town. And then you'll notice there was a couple consent agenda items for information. No motion is required on those. Dr. Cook, I'll turn it over to you for getting our finance items started here.
Okay, I'd like to turn it over to Director of Finance, Katie Ebner, and I think she's available on Zoom for us. She's got a small presentation to talk through.
Everybody hear me? Am I good to go? All right. Chair Morrisroe, I'm hearing myself with some feedback. Let me turn this down. Hold on. Chair Morrisroe, members of the board, I have prepared a memo in your packet discussing our final units for our final state foundation funding, which is generated by school support units. We had some very unexpected and very great news with our final report. In fact, this news was so good, I looked at the report and I said, there's a mistake. I'm going to email the state, and I'm not even going to crunch the numbers because it was really, really, the units were much higher than anticipated. So that was a great, I verified it with the state. We went through the data. There were a couple changes we had to make. They made an error in one place, but the data was correct in the end. The way the state calculated our attendance during the closure accounted for additional funding for us to the tune of an extra $612,000 over budget. So really great news. This was a welcome relief to closing out our FY20 fiscal year. If you recall, when we were building the budget, we discussed an operational deficit for fiscal year 20 due to programming deficits for food service as well as School Plus. So that is a huge relief there. And so I'm sure you all would want to know what the net impact is. But at this point, we're still working through our fiscal year 20 audit. I don't want to give any final numbers at this point because they haven't been verified by our auditors. So I will wait until we finish that work up and our financial statements are audited. So I'll turn it over if you have any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Ebner? I'll go with one. Just Katie, obviously, with the audit going on, the annual audit, can't give us final numbers on 2020, but a welcome surprise here, and certainly a better picture than we anticipated 60 days ago when we were finalizing budget, to the tune of at least hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Right. Yeah, $612,000. The revenues are higher than budget. So not only we were expecting a 1% cut in revenues, but the way that they calculated it, this backfilled that cut as well as giving us additional money. So it's really good news in the end.
And for the audit, are we looking probably November before we have the audit report?
Yeah, late October is where we're at this point. We always hope to get it earlier, but with COVID, things are going a little bit slower than usual. So we definitely want to make sure we hit that deadline with the state. So I'm saying late October at this point.
Okay. Do you know those, it was really kind of an attendance rule at the end there that made the difference, is that right? Because they basically counted everyone as present 100% of the time?
Yeah, it didn't quite, in pouring through the data, I was trying to find a pattern, especially when I was convinced that there was an error. Secondary, it looked like they gave us our full enrollment for a number of weeks. So in working through it with them, they assured me that districts were all treated the same as far as the way the formula worked, but I wasn't able to get to get into the details of what their exact method is. I just wanted to know because, you know, looking at it, I want to understand how it worked. But in the end, the conversation was, what do you want from us? Less units? And I said, no. So.
And so are we anticipating, it's kind of similar rules for right now when it comes to attendance is
honestly
really
don't know.
enrollment based, or?
I really, the state hasn't finalized. I know that there's been discussion of enrollment based, but to the staff members that I work with, as far as how attendance is reported, that decision hasn't been made down to their level. But I think things seem to change very quickly. So I would expect us to be an enrollment funding model for this fall.
And I would just remind the board that last year, the legislators passed a rule that established enrollment criteria and the cut dates for the enrollment procedure that we're expected to report on. That set 4 dates annually: October 1st, December 1st, February 1st, and April 1st. And essentially, even before some kind of, if we ever do get into an enrollment-based funding formula or something along those lines, they established that as something that we were going to be expected to do moving forward in the IDAPA rule process. So we will participate in that, and I do fully expect at some point the State Department will inform that will have some kind of an impact on how we are going to be funded this year. Now, to what extent it remains attendance, to what extent it transfers over to enrollment, is what Katie is saying at this point. They still haven't decided, but I can tell you that it's definitely going to look different.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Any other questions for Ms. Ebner? Okay. Why don't we move on to the next item? And this is a information and action item regarding the sale of the 10 acres behind Hayden Meadows, commonly referred to as the soccer fields, that was authorized a few months ago from the board, and as you are authorized by the board. And that bid procedure closed last week, and so
yeah, we're excited to bring at least some options back to you guys. And so I'm going to ask Jeff Voller, who's here in person, and I think we have Megan O'Dowd on Zoom available to answer any of your questions. Jeff can talk through kind of the process that we worked and the results of the bids that we did receive, and just kind of talk through what our next steps might look like.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Morrisroe, Superintendent Cook, members of the board. So having given the notice of the sale of property and going through the procedures that we need to for that, last Tuesday on September 8th, we had a public bid opening at the school district office, and we're pleased to have received 8 bids with a low bid of around $900,000 and then a high bid of $1,525,255 from Colca Land Ryan C. Stoker Separate Property Trust was the full title of the winning company, or the high bid of that company. I had legal review all the bids for compliance, and the bids were in compliance. And so, and in your packet, you have a whole breakdown of the different bids. And so I'd remind you of the document that legal put together for us that I think we reviewed when we decided to go for the sale of property of options. And so we can reject all bids. We can accept the high bid. The one requirement is that it exceeds the appraised value. And there is an appraisal that you guys were given today and for review on that. And it has to be within 1 year of the appraisal, which that appraisal was completed in December of 2019. And this offer does exceed the value of that. So we are in compliance there. And there is also another thing to factor into this and consider. We did receive a letter from the city of Hayden that suggested a trade of the 1.76 acres that they have just north of the existing Nexa building, the old Nexa building, or the Hayden School, I guess we also call it. So So that is up for consideration as well. I think you'll find they have suggested some values of that, and I think those values are probably considerably under what we received in terms of the high offer, but probably a point of discussion to note that we received that letter as well, and something that is probably worth talking through a little bit as well for that. We are able to trade with public entities, so if we wanted to entertain that trade, we could certainly consider that. And that if there's legal questions that you guys have, we have Megan on as well that can kind of talk us through the legal options of what we need to do with this. And so I think with that, I will see if you guys have any questions or needing clarification on the process. I guess the one point is we would need to accept the appraisal first before we make a motion to, if you guys decide to accept the high offer that we got from the opening, from the public bids.
I would just clarify that I think if it's possible that you're going to reject all bids, you wouldn't necessarily have to bring the appraisal into the record.
Right, correct.
Yeah, so I think maybe what's best to do is that we have any discussion that's needed or any questions that need to be answered. We handle those. If we're going to move towards accepting the bids, then we will need to accept the appraisal first, put that into the record. There's a motion that was handed out to do that. And then there would be a motion to authorize the superintendent to move into a purchase and sale agreement to finalize the sale. And then that final sale will be subject to board approval. So why don't we clear up any questions or comments regarding either the bid or City of Hayden's interests?
Well, I would just comment that I do appreciate the City of Hayden coming forward. And if it were a closer bid, or we were looking at bids that didn't exceed the fair market value in some fashion, or they were a close call, but I just don't think, in my opinion, to do our due diligence and taking care of our financial aspects and getting the most value we can for a property, it's just not an option in light of where the bids came out from my perspective.
Yeah, I tend to agree that I appreciate City of Hayden with the desire to save that green space that I think all of us have had kids that have played soccer out there or cross country or different things along the lines, and kind of realize the importance of that. But I would agree when we're looking at the financial duties that we have as trustees for our district and the need to acquire land in an area of growth. We really need the cash in this situation, and so I would be inclined to accept the purchase as opposed to a trade as well.
I agree. I would accept the purchase as well.
I think it's important just to go back to mention our long-range plan that was just approved just within the last few months, and so this kind of a buy-sell kind of an agreement is really important to that long-range plan that was approved, and so I too would want to move forward. I am sorry I wish it could have maybe worked out a little different for Hayden, definitely, but I think it's important for a district to acquire, to move forward just with our long-range plan.
Yeah, I would echo all those similar comments. I think the only thing additionally I'd like to add is commitment by this board that we use these funds towards acquisition of land. I know we can't encumber future boards, but even if it's just a verbal commitment that we acknowledge we will need funds to acquire lands in areas that our long-range plan has showed that we have growth. Moving forward for our community, I think it might be easier to understand, because I think that is a valued and cherished property and has been for many years, and so it is disappointing, I'm sure, to many in the community that it will no longer be available. But if they recognize that we're looking forward and that this will allow us the opportunity to purchase land where we most need it, I think it would be easier to understand.
I would agree that I'd like to see us kind of earmark those funds. And Dr. Cook, I believe you said Megan is on, right? So Megan, is that something we could do in a motion, that we would ask that the funds, for the proceeds from the sale, be set aside into an account to be used for land acquisition only?
Good evening, trustees. Thank you for having me. I think certainly the board has the power and the flexibility to earmark the funds. I think I would certainly defer to your finance director and Dr. Cook on their thoughts, but I guess my only legal hesitation is if we do that, it would take another motion to undo it. So I think, as Trustee May said, maybe some sort of just oral commitment short of board action, because it couldn't exceed our fiscal year already anyways. I don't know if the board could even allocate and find other property before the end of the fiscal year here. But so I guess my suggestion would not to put it in a formal motion. I think that's a little too restrictive, but there's no legal requirement that you do or don't do so.
If we were going to do something like that, would it be now, or would it be at the time of sale when we actually approve the final buy-sell agreement or purchase and sale agreement?
I think you could do it either time. Certainly, the motions that I think that the board has in front of it this evening contemplate that if one of these bids is awarded this evening, the purchase and sale agreement and the final transaction would have to come before the board one more time. So that could certainly be the time that the board, orally or more formally earmarks those funds.
So maybe what we could do, if there's some interest in that, is we could not do that tonight as far as earmarking, but have that discussion when the final sale is approved. And maybe we could look at it a couple ways, either through a formal motion or perhaps a resolution or just a statement of purpose, or maybe some ideas, and that would give Megan a chance to kind of understand the legal ramifications of doing those things and explain that to us. So. Okay. Any other comments?
Other than thank you, Jeff. This is exciting news for us, I think, moving forward. So I know Long Range Planning will be excited to hear that we've moved forward on kind of consolidating our assets and making a move to find land where we really need it. So thank you.
Yeah, it was a great response that we received from this bid. The last property we sold was Thomas Lane. And while I think the value was fair of that, we did only have one bidder on that property. And so it was nice to have some competition and have some serious interest from a lot of quality community members and experienced developers from our area that were eager to show their interest. Do we have an idea when, what kind of timing as far as close on this? I think there's an easement issue that we need to just clarify, right?
I think in the documents it said 30 days. Okay. So once you approve and we sign the purchase and sale agreement. So that we'll start that moving forward after tonight, assuming we move forward with it.
And have you talked to the buyer, Mr. Voller?
I've talked to a representative of part of this group, yes.
I'm just curious. I think it'd be nice to know, since we are leasing that facility to the soccer folks who knew it was for sale, obviously, but they have their fall season upon them, and they're certainly utilizing those fields now. So if it was going to change ownership in 30 days, it might be nice for them to know, can they continue to stay there through the fall until they put a shovel in the ground, or those sorts of things, or maybe we just need to connect them with the purchaser.
Yeah, I haven't had that specific conversation, but I'm happy to have that one.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. So if we want to go ahead and move forward, then we would need to have the motion that's on the first page there to accept the appraisal. If someone wants to move or make that motion. Do we need to? Yes? Okay, I'll go ahead and read it. Let's see. So the district has designated the 10 acres known as the Hayden Meadows soccer fields as surplus property to be sold via sealed bid. As required by Idaho code, the district obtained an appraisal for the property prior to conducting the sale. The appraisal was completed by Valbridge Property Advisors on December 31st, 2019. The appraised valuation came in at $900,000. Idaho code requires that this appraisal and the appraised amount be entered into the district record and used to establish the value for the property prior to accepting a motion for the sale of property. The board cannot sell the property for less than the appraised value.
As required by Idaho code, I move that the board enter the appraisal conducted by Valbridge Property Advisors into the records of the Board of Trustees, thereby establishing the minimum value of the property.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. I'm not going to go through the full introduction on this next one because Mr. Voller mainly did that. I think the kind of the main part of it is that the property was advertised for sale pursuant to the sealed bid process. Bids were opened on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020 at the district office. District received a total of 8 bids. The highest responsive bid was received from Colca Land, Ryan C. Stoker, Separate Property Trust, with a bid of $1,525,255. And there was a resolution that hopefully you've seen that if we want to make a motion would authorize the superintendent to enter into the purchase and sale agreement with the high bidder. And prior to that being finalized, it would come back to the Board of Trustees for final approval, approximately 30 days. So if someone wants to make that motion.
I move that the board adopt resolution 20-21-004 to accept the high bid and authorize the superintendent to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with Colca Land, Ryan C. Stoker Separate Property Trust, the final terms of which will be subject to approval by the board.
I second the motion.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries, Ms. Town. And thank you, Mr. Voller. And Ryan C. Stoker. Okay, thanks, Megan. All right, so let me just catch up here. So we are moving into some action items here, and under long-range planning, we have a couple things we need to do. We need to approve the new committee members. They've made a request to revise the bylaws, the long-range planning committee, that is. And then we need to pick a board liaison. So, yeah, I said that. Thank you. Okay, so the list was in there, I believe. Is that correct? And Ms. Mayer or Ms. Brumley, do either of you want to speak to any of these? At least the committee and the bylaws portion?
No, I think it was exciting. They reopened the application process and received quite a few applications, and so I think that's exciting. I see that they have 3 alternates, which is always good, starting a busy year, and so looks like a great committee. Thank you to them if they're watching, and hopefully we'll move to approve them. And I think the bylaw change was just something we've been talking about many years in the making, that it's difficult to elect a vice chair and chair in the beginning of the year. And if they could do that at the end of their year, it would allow them to move forward and move towards creating a subcommittee for new members. So it was just something that we wanted to do for a while, and we wanted to properly take care of it this year. So.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the new committee members as presented?
So moved.
Is that what I'm looking for, Ms. Town? Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And then just for clarification, Ms. May, so the change would move the vice chair elections from the beginning of the year to the end of the previous year. Is that correct? Okay. And if my memory serves me right, the vice chair is then chair the following year. Is that correct?
If they're still on the committee and they are able to do so. But the prior year, we had a situation where a vice chair moved, and so then we were looking for a chair at the beginning of the year. So this would help eliminate that also and kind of get us more organized moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to approve the revised bylaws as presented?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Town. And then last but not least, we need to pick a board liaison. And I know, Ms. May, you've served in that role the last few years. And I know, Ms. Brumley, you've kind of rode along there at times as well. So is there someone looking to raise their hand and serve as liaison?
You know, I feel like I've had a good run at it, and I'm happy to share the responsibility if somebody else is interested. So.
I think Lisa's done a great job there, and if you wanted to continue doing it, Lisa, I would fully support that. I like being backup, but as long as you want to continue doing it, I think that's great.
I think I'm ready for a change of pace and maybe devote my interest to something else. I think it's a good opportunity, especially for new board members, to get to know community members and get to familiarize themselves with our long-range plan. It's a good year, I think, to make a change because it'll probably be a slower year than in prior years, and I think leading in the next year we'll probably be getting busy again, so it would be a good year for a change in leadership or board liaison. So if anybody's interested, I think it would be a good year to make that change.
Okay. So, Ms. Brumley, you raised your hand. I think, Lisa, you're saying you're looking forward to stepping aside from this role for the year, I think is what I heard. You said it nice. Anyone else interested, or does someone want to appoint Ms. Brumley as the board liaison or make a motion to?
Open either way. Also willing to be your backup if that's how that works in the future. Do you typically, because I haven't, again, I'm only been here for a little bit, so typically have a backup?
I don't know that we typically have. It's just
That's just
I
the way
came
you've
off long range coming into the board and had such an interest in it that I just wanted to continue following it. And so truthfully, if you're interested in it, Rebecca, I've been on the board. I've been following it for 2 years. I'm happy to have you take on that role, and if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I'm very open to that.
Great.
And as far as just being a part of that again, and excited about where we've come from and what could be ahead. So
Well, I would nominate Rebecca Smith.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. So it's
And-
been, go ahead.
And I'll continue to also be backup too. If, I still want to participate and I enjoy those, so I'll be there.
Nice work, Ms. Brumley. Okay, and thank you, Ms. Smith. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Town, do we usually do that through motion or just, can't remember?
We've done it.
Both ways? Okay. All right. It's done. Okay, Dr. Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Morrisroe. So if you recall, we've been running this, we call it pay-to-play full-day kindergarten in many of our schools. about as far as how many schools that we would have access to. And because of the uniqueness of this school year, we started having conversations about whether or not that might be the best set of circumstances. And some folks are already, have asked for, we'd like to pay for the year, and we're not even sure what we would charge them. And so we started that discussion pretty early on. It led to some other conversations about money that we get from the state that have to be used for very specific purposes that are use them or lose them kinds of funds. And so I'm going to turn this over to Katie Ebner to also present to you some conversations and maybe a best path forward. And I would tell you right now, it's not the best path as a best path. It's a best path of a difficult situation and how we would potentially navigate what might wind up being quite complex year with the limited resources, with the limited amount of employees and resources that we have to manage that. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie before I think she yells at me for taking her whole presentation.
All right, can everybody hear me? Oh. No, you can't hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dr. Cook, Chair Morrisroe, members of the board. I am going to walk you through just a summary of this memo shared with you all on August 25th. There are a lot of moving pieces here for our full tuition-based full-day kindergarten program. Currently, we have full-day kindergarten at Title I schools. Our schools identified with the highest free and reduced population. So then we have 6 remaining schools that do not have a full day or did not have a full day kindergarten program, which we added one section of tuition based full day kindergarten. The charge for that is $275 per month for 9 months. And what that does is it funds the other half of the teacher for that program because the state only funds half-day kindergarten in Idaho. So that's the background as to why we charge tuition for kindergarten in some circumstances. So parents in this program have asked whether or not they would be required to pay full tuition or any tuition this year, given the uncertainty of how many instructional minutes were in session, how much face-to-face instruction we're providing. So we've been listening to parents' questions. We've been kind of working through this. A lot of different moving pieces here, and I'm going to hopefully be able to cover all of them. But Dr. Cook mentioned that there is a funding source if we were to reduce or waive full-day kindergarten tuition. It currently would not have an impact on other programming this year because we receive, it's called K-3 literacy funding, and we use quite a bit of that funding for professional development. And this year with COVID and travel being restricted, we have some remaining funds in that budget that could be directed towards funding or waiving or reducing the tuition and still funding that other half of the teacher. So that is good news. And this funding is use it or lose it. So finding a way to use it helps us keep the money being, helps us spend the money on our students rather than sending it back to the state. So, and this is acceptable for our K-3 literacy funding because there is a link between additional instruction in kindergarten and improved literacy. These funds have to be used for improving literacy in kindergarten through 3rd grade. One thing to think about is fairness to all kindergarten families. If we were to waive or reduce tuition, it's likely that there were families that did not attempt to enroll in our tuition-based full-day K kindergarten because they could not afford the cost, and that creates an unfair situation for those families that would have enrolled had they known it would be free or a reduced tuition. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is just fairness towards those families. From the perspective of families that are enrolled in the program, though, their students still are receiving more instruction than a half-day kindergarten student, more face-to-face instruction and remote instruction, but those families may not value the benefit of remote instruction as much as they value the benefit of face-to-face instruction, and they may not feel that paying for additional remote instruction is it may be difficult for them because they would have to pay for childcare on top of tuition. So the tuition may have been in the budget, but not childcare and tuition for working parents. So one solution would be to reduce tuition in proportion to the number of minutes that the student is receiving face-to-face instruction above what a half-day kindergartner receives. It would be difficult with current finance staffing because there's the question of what if a particular section of tuition-based full-day K goes into cannot be face-to-face because there's a case of COVID. Would we be crediting for those days that we are not in session face-to-face? What if a student is exposed individually and that student is not able to come to school? Would we be crediting tuition in that situation? So it would create a lot of extra work on our finance staff, which at this point would probably not be possible with the current staff on hand. So another possibility is, depending on the board's decision, if the decision is to keep tuition the same or continue to charge tuition, families may request to be moved to a half-day program. That would put some pressure on principals to make space for those students in the half-day program. So especially now that school has started. I think I've covered every one of the considerations we had gone through. So given all of that, the pros and cons, administration recommends that tuition be suspended for the current school year. We recommend that the full day kindergarten sections remain with the students that are enrolled at this point. And if any space opens in those sections, that a new lottery is created to give families that otherwise wouldn't have entered the lottery when it was tuition based. So that would give them an opportunity to access the program. And I think that was it. And then we operate to a full day program to the greatest extent possible, given what color phase we're in. Any questions on that?
Questions for Ms. Ebner?
Some general kindergarten questions. They might be for Kate or Roscoe also. I don't know if she's available. But the first one, Katie, I was curious, generally the K-3 literacy funds, what is the amount that we receive from the state in total annually for that fund?
Last year it was $800,000. It's based on the number of students that score basic or below basic on the, oh my gosh, I am going to space on the name of the test because I'm a finance person and our instruction people are shouting it at their computers.
IRI.
So on that exam, and we get a certain dollar amount per student.
And so the funds that we received last year, is that what we calculated for our 2020-21 budget, or are we waiting to hear what our funds will be? Like, how did those funds work? Are they in the rears, or are they moving forward?
They're not exactly in arrears. We did budget the same amount because the state did not cut the K-3 literacy line item, and we felt that it was going to be close enough to prior year amount. So we're still on track for that budget.
Perfect. And then, minus the $200,000, what do we spend the other $400,000 on for our K-3 literacy funds for K-3 students? What other types of programs would we expect to see these funds go towards?
Kate Keinert, are you on the call? Because you would be able to explain it in greater detail, how it integrates into instruction.
Sure. Good evening, Chair Morrisroe, members of the board. So I have put together this proposal the last few years. It recently, last year, doubled. It was around $450, and then Governor Little really made a bigger push to include greater funding for this. So when it increased, in the past, we've spent money on additional staff. You've put money toward the CDA Reads summer program. We've given money to build each individual building to use toward their own K-3 initiatives. So maybe they were buying extra supports, or they used it to hire people or to think outside the box. We've used it in sending people to the PEBC thinking strategies. And so this year, when we're looking at potentially covering more kindergarten teachers, or what Katie's talking about, I've moved the CDA Reads summer program out of that budget and into another budget that it fits in with pretty well. We've preserved the money that gets allocated to the building so they can still make some of those decisions. And we've removed the PEBC trainings from that. So that's kind of how we've shifted things around.
Oh, thank you. So many community members ask all the time what we spend our K-3 literacy dollars on, and I feel like I never really had a grasp. So thank you for that explanation. And you might be able to help with the next question too. How was our interest for all-day K this year? Was there a wait list that was generated? Do we see similar interest as last year? Just generally, what did you guys see?
Lisa, did you say my name? I couldn't hear that very first part.
Either one of you, either one of the kids would be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. It depended on school, but I think that the interest in all day K has increased every single year a little. The shift this year with the pandemic has essentially turned everything upside down. But every single year we've seen an increase in interest in full day K in all of our schools. Sometimes they didn't see that originally, and then as it got closer to the beginning of the year, there was more interest. But I would say in probably every school there's some waiting list for full day K.
There is, okay. And then are we offering eSchool full day K, or is it just a half day K program?
I'll say full day K. What happens in the eSchool right now is that in the mornings for our kinders, families have some group time with their teacher, mini lessons. They do some small group work with their teacher. They also have a conferring session. And then in the afternoons, it's mostly asynchronous. And then teachers come back with kids and their families at the end of the day for kind of a landing, they call it. So they launch the day in the beginning of the day, and then they land at the end of the day. It's just, it's a little different in the eSchool because the learning is spread out throughout the course of the day, but they don't expect the kids to be on with their teacher all day. So the afternoon work is asynchronous learning.
Thank you very much.
I certainly understand the request, and it's supportive of the request. I think the biggest heartburn I have is that what Ms. Sebner brought up, that there's some folks that may not have chose all day K because of financial reasons, but could benefit from it, and we're kind of changing the rules here after we started the game a little bit. That's where I have the most heartburn. So I'm not sure how we can accommodate those people. I looked at the enrollment, and it looked like it's just 6 schools, I think, that have tuition-based all-day K, right? And I realized numbers of in-person learning are down currently, but there were 6. Each school had one full-day session and one half-day session. So I guess I wonder, what if we just make them both full-day sessions? Or just make kindergarten full day. I think that would be my desire. I think long term, we've never had the space. We have the space right now. Maybe we don't have the money for that. But if not that, how do we accommodate students, or can we accommodate students that maybe if now they don't have to pay for it, they're interested in it, other than Well, if a spot opens up, which is probably highly unlikely, that they would have dibs for it.
Can I clarify, just to make sure I understand what you're suggesting, that, so at Skyway, for example, where we only have one full day K, but multiple full kindergarten, Skyway seems like it retained much of its student enrollment from last year. So you're saying offer, they have 4 sections of kindergarten this year? I don't have it in front of me, but.
What I just looked at, I saw every school, I missed Skyway. Skyway has 3 sections of kindergarten. So they have 1 full-time, 2 half-time. Looks like all the others have 1 full-time, 1 half-time. So it would be 7 sections. There's 6 full-day sessions between those 6 schools, 1 at each, and then there's 7 half-day sections, 2 at Skyway, 1 at each of the others. Now, if we offered full-day K, we may get some people wanting to come back. I don't know. I think long-term, it certainly sounds like that's the goal of this board, would be to move to an all-day K. And just throwing it out there.
Would it be possible to expand the program? There will be some parents that don't want all-day K. We know that, through our past surveys, that there are those parents that don't need it. But would there be a way to expand all-day K for those parents who now have interest at particular schools where we know there is more of a wait list, like Skyway? I know last year there was many disappointed parents who didn't have access to all-day K. Is that something, Kate?
Yeah. One thing I think I worry a little bit about, trustees, is the sheer number of unknowns that we're dealing with right now. For instance, I know that Becky Miller has been on the phone with at least some families in the East School who were hoping that that maybe some of the synchronous learning could have happened in the afternoon, and they're trying to decide whether they want to register back in a brick and mortar school. We have some movement between. We have a waiting list for the East School, but we also have some families that are reconsidering and thinking about being in the brick and mortar schools as well. And I think I have some nervousness about opening that possibility up, and whether or not that will open, maybe not a floodgate certainly, but will open the possibility of families coming in that we hadn't. We've in the interest of the budget, through attrition, we've really cut back, as I'm sure you've seen, in staffing. And I think that all of our principals are biting their nails a little bit, like, are these really going to be our numbers, or will we be seeing families return, once we hit yellow or once we hit green? What will we see in terms of families coming back? And I'm wondering if we would reduce our ability to predict enrollment with K. If we were to open that up right now, I could sure see why it's a benefit to families. I worry a little bit about the uncertainty of what that might mean for enrollment and staffing.
Yeah, I understand it's a tough ask, but I don't know. Worthy of consideration, I think, at some point. And maybe now is not the right point, but at some point it is.
I would also wonder if we're able to do it within the budget this year, going forward. I know lots of things are up in the air, but if we're able to do it this year, are we able to do it next year at a greater level and continue to open up full day kindergarten for those that want it? And I think that's an important thing to really consider. So,
and I think you'd hear from us that there's a commitment to try to get to that full day K staffing and solve that problem. We do believe, at least right now, we think we could predict usage of buildings would allow for that for next year, for the 21 school year, 21-22 school year, and that we would be looking to get that put into place. And we do anticipate that, we averaged, prior to COVID, we average about 900 kids per grade level. And in kindergarten, we typically see about 700 or so. So we anticipate that we would get those kids if we were full day, that most of those kids, maybe not all, but most of those kids would likely come in because there's just a tremendous amount of benefit to go to that. And so there's not only is it a space cost, but it would also be a increased need for resources, and we would have to hire some more teachers.
So Dr. Cook, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. So you think next year we could accommodate potentially moving to all-day K facility-wise, space-wise across the board?
Space-wise, facility-wise, I think that I do anticipate that it could be done. The one challenge, if the instability that COVID predicts, or I guess creates is probably a better way to put it, could create a situation in which it would be difficult to predict that. But right now, it wouldn't be a long-term solution because we still do anticipate that we're going to have a glitch this year in enrollment, but we do anticipate that it's going to come back. But I do anticipate that, yes, we would strive to make that goal be put in place for the following year.
I just wanted to add to your discussion as far as creating more sections for full day kindergarten in the current fiscal year. I do want to just put a little bit of caution as far as the budget. There is a lot of uncertainty at this time. The state did give us some good news last week. However, I'm still reading some stipulations from the U.S. Treasury as far as the coronavirus relief funds. So I hopefully wouldn't want to make a decision at this meeting when there are so many pieces to the budget that we don't have a complete picture of.
Well, I think what we do know is we do have some additional CARES funds that have been added back in, with some details still to come, but that we're going to see. We had some great news tonight about units from last year that we didn't expect, to the tune of several $100,000, likely to translate to this year as well. And so, I don't know. I do want to, really quickly, the U.S. Treasury document for the coronavirus relief funds stipulate that is not to be used to backfill any funding cuts for governmental agencies. So the state is going to address that this week. So I want to make sure that is still a big question mark. As far as Governor Little's address last week made it sound like 100% of these funds are backfilling your budgets. I am seeing conflicting information that I do not feel that any decisions should be made on at this point. Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, but I think we've talked a lot about equity in the district, and just real quick, adding it up, there's 24 sections of kindergarten in our 11 buildings. 7 of them are half day, 17 are full day, and then you have another 4 in the e-school that are full day. So we have 28 kindergarten sections, 7 of them are half day, so 25%. So again, I think long-term it would be all our goal, and maybe next year is where we set our sights. Maybe this is a step that we're going from whatever it is, 14 that were not paid and to 21, and next year we're going to try to go to 28. And so maybe that's just the logical stepping stone, but just something to think about, I guess. Yeah, and I think if that's the case, then we try to figure out how to accommodate our existing half-day students as spots open up. Make sure they know they're opened up. Any other questions on this? Ms. Town, do we need to make a motion to?
I'll move that tuition be suspended for the 2020-2021 school year, that the full-day kindergarten sections remain with the students enrolled, and that the sections operate as a full-day program to the greatest extent possible.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Looks like we have 4 policies that are for action. Ms. Town, I believe these were all, did Did we have these for info last month? Okay, thank you. So these were for info last month, which was about 5.5 weeks ago, I think 5 weeks ago. And it looks like no public comment received on any of them. If there's discussion, we could go by policy. If there's not discussion, then we can just, someone could make a motion to approve the policies as presented. So any discussion on any of them or questions? Okay, someone want to make a motion?
I move to approve them as presented.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're making up for last month's meeting here. We've got 2 items left. And Dr. Cook, do you want to introduce this first one? This has been floating around in our to-do list here for a few months at least. And so Dr. Cook and Trustee May and I have talked a little bit and just wanted to get this in front of the board so we can have some discussion and kind of figure out next steps on this.
Yep. As you know, there's been some discussion around our fundraising policies, and we've actually had a couple of public comments in which people have requested that the board consider modification of the policies. In your board packet, you will notice that in the 1920 school year, we had several of our schools participate in a fairly popular fundraising program that made quite a bit of money. But it also drew attention to existing policies and actions that were being done within those policies that may have been counterintuitive. And so after a substantial amount of investigation, we discovered that many of the policies were either in need of updating and changing, or the procedures and practices that our schools were undertaking needed to be modified because we were violating our own policies. So we went through and spent a significant amount of time discussing those things and summarized some of those moves, and then presented those findings right before we kind of shut down prior to COVID, presented those to the PTAs as a collective through our Spark committee. To mixed reviews, I might add. I think several folks were a little surprised to find out that there were some pretty straightforward expectations and guidelines existing in our policies regarding fundraisers, and some of them that I think even several folks found to be in need of addressing. And so what we have done at this point is just brought that attention to you guys, back to either the board tasks us with either taking those policies on and reworking them to fit that expectation, or potentially to give us some guidance on what they want to see with those policies and whether or not this board supports those policies, because that conflict now has risen to the level where we've got some folks that believe they should be redone to address it, and some folks who are like, we can live within them. And so that's kind of where it stands at this point. And we would love to have that discussion with you to see what your next steps would be for us to move forward on.
Yeah, just before we get into discussion on this, just want to point out we did have communication from Nancy Hart, who has sent us some comments previously as a representative as one of the PTA presidents of either Canfield or CHS, or potentially both, with some comments. And she was going to join us tonight and make public comment, but couldn't because of a family conflict there. So we did have those. That comment wasn't in the board packet, but hopefully you received that email for her. And I think, to me, what would be helpful, and I guess I don't see us or I don't anticipate us solving this policy tonight, but maybe laying the groundwork as to whether we collectively as a board, feel that it needs review. And if it does, how do we want to handle that? We could do a policy workshop. We could hand it back to administration and ask that they, pull a group of PTA folks and other parents together and kind of talk about it and maybe come up with some suggested revisions. If we're going to go that route, maybe what areas of concern do we have? And then maybe the third option is, no, we're happy with the way it is and we think it needs to be enforced the way it's written. So.
Yeah, I think one, first housekeeping, make sure that we get Ms. Hart's comments included in the packet. So if there's community members that want to see them, they're able to view those comments, since they did represent quite a few members on the Spark Committee. And after chatting with Nancy about her concerns, it seemed as though they're really just looking for a resolution for this year, recognizing this policy in the future most likely needs to be reevaluated, not just for their interest, but for the general equity piece in our fundraising policy. But what they're really looking for is a solution so they can start fundraising for their schools this year. And there's a worry that they will not be able to raise funds for programs in the past that they've had. And so they're looking for a compromise, and I think they're willing to defer from individual incentives and move towards group incentives or class incentives or school incentives for this calendar year until we can take on the fundraising policy in earnest. I know that we have a lot to take on this year. We've put some things on hold because of COVID. And for me, fundraising and our equity piece is important, but I think we have some items that may be in front of this as far as scheduling a board workshop. So I'm hopeful we can have a discussion, and maybe with Dr. Cook, with your input, we can work towards compromise for the Spark Committee and for those schools that want to continue fundraising for this calendar year.
Yeah, I would agree with what Lisa just said. And as far as fundraising for this year, we know, if anyone's ever been a part of that, that actually started last year. So I'm hopeful that we can work with them so that they can continue their efforts for this school year.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Trustee May, because I was, I guess, a little confused, or that was a question I had regarding Nancy's comments, and maybe it's just my interpretation. I was trying to find it here, but I thought the policy allowed for that, for kind of class rewards or group rewards, but not individual, not rewarding to the individual student, I guess, because if you're doing it to a class, it at least gives everyone in that class a chance. And then, I'm not wording that very right, but I thought was allowed. So I was a little confused by her comment on that.
And so I think that's why it would be nice just to kind of, Dr. Cook, hear your perspective on conflicts with the policy if they moved away from individual rewards and focused more on group rewards, whether it would be, what the board's comfortable with, if it's a classroom reward or a school reward. Because you're right, I think the policy is open for interpretation, but they wanted to ensure that they were following the policy and that they could move forward fundraising in a manner that the board was comfortable with.
Yeah, so I think and I'm going to try to find this here. All right, Lynn, see if I can do this. I'm going to lead. You guys click on follow me.
Okay, so we're using our new program here. So follow leader.
Follow leader.
Okay, mine says following.
All right, do you see is your screen moving?
No.
All right, I'm going to. Did that show up highlighted on your screen? Okay, so on page, let's try it this way. It just took a second. Okay. So on. Yep. So we presented this on February 28th to Spark. And I can tell you that the first three summarizations of our policy were actually received quite fine by Spark, and Spark was committed to try to find something to match up with that. It didn't necessarily make all of our vendors happy that partner with us, because there are some things that you can completely circumvent a vendor. If a parent wants to just donate to the school or donate to the particular group, they have that right. So vendors actually stand to lose some money through that action. But 1, 2, and 3 were, quite frankly, very well received. The one place that we did struggle with was number 4. And I think one of the things that we could talk about is this. If you look at number 4, is the part of the policy, or the part of the practice, if you will, that we could add some flexibility to, where it says no prizes are awarded to individual students for selling a certain amount of items, and prizes must be given school-wide. That is where we could have some flexibility. It would be pretty easy for us to say, can we just watch out how we do the individual piece, and do something that broadens that appeal, but at the same time doesn't necessarily have to be limited to only a school-wide celebration. That would give a little bit of a flexibility to that kind of competitive, whatever you want to call that, competitive piece that might be motivational for some kids, and would make it be a little bit more sustainable. The part of where we worked through this, and I think the intent of the policies of this board and previous boards, was the idea that students' inability to generate a solution shouldn't prohibit them from being able to be a part of whatever that celebration might be. And I'll give you the example. Last year, the Day of Awesomeness that happened at many of our schools, there were things that kids could participate in. There were things that kids who had that all kids could participate in. There were things that kids who had reached a certain threshold could get more. And then the kids that produced the most amount of resources in the fundraiser got these extra special things. And that, quite frankly, was a direct violation of the policy. And so I think we could work with our PTAs and with our vendors to say, look, we want to eliminate the individual reward and try to make this a little more collaborative in that. And I do believe that some of our vendors who have been kind of waiting on us to make that decision would be willing to be flexible in their actions in that regard. But I do think that we would probably need to do some work on the policies on the backside to also make sure those align. But I can tell you that number 4 was the one that really created the most headaches for vendors, also created the most headaches for our PTAs, but lives, maybe not verbatim in the way it's written here, but lives in the policies currently that we would want to attend to eventually.
Dr. Cook, I had a quick question about the one line where it says no prizes are awarded to individual students for selling certain amounts of items. You know, having been a parent in this district for quite some time, was that line just not followed closely? Because that practice has been happening frequently, whether it's coupon book sales. So was it just this one event that kind of tilted or opened everyone's eyes that we weren't following policy, and it was recommended that we review and revisit? Because I think that has been happening for many years.
Yeah, so this event actually drew a lot of attention to a lot of different things, and even, you know, the fact that the expectation is that we publicly declare how much money is going to the school in our policies was something I think that hasn't even been done for years. And so that's the part about this that was the most eye-opening, was, you know, in some regards, the practices that we had been undertaking had become to be just kind of a life upon themselves. And so when we went back and reflected through the policies and really did analysis with this and built a team of PTA leaders and building administrators that was like, oh my goodness, we either need to get our practices in order or get our policies to match our practices. And so, yes, the answer is we were kind of a ways away from what had been recorded. So.
You know, a couple things. I think it's important to kind of just acknowledge the function of our PTAs and the benefit that they provide for our teachers. I mean, we're talking between 17 schools, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or at least easily $100,000, if not more. I know it's more than $100,000. And so, you know, that's money that is used for, you know, by our teachers to support our students, and money that helps us offer things, you know, and certainly we don't want to turn our backs to that support that we have from our community and our PTA folks and our families. I think I like what Ms. May suggested, if that's kind of an agreeable solution, that if for this year we kind of Band-Aid this and we say, okay, let's eliminate the individual rewards, but let's go by, step 1, 2, and 3 there and have it be some sort of group award, whether it's by class or however else you came up with, and kind of test that with administration and Spark to figure out. Makes a lot of sense. And then we look at the policy more long-term to fine tune it and get it in line, whether it's practice or function or intent, a little bit of both.
I would ask for guidance from this board on what that might look like and what those expectations might look like as we, if we're going to say for this year, for example, class rewards would be acceptable as we work through these policies. Something like that would be specific enough that our schools would, people are rule followers and they want to do they don't want to break rules and they don't want to do this wrong. And the very first thing they said when they found out that we had some issues was, okay, well, how do we fix this? And I think what they'd like from us is some pretty clear guidelines. So I think we're open to that conversation, and I do think at some point we probably need to put some attention into those policies so that they fit our beliefs and our practices.
I would just like to echo what Chair Morrisroe mentioned earlier, a big thank you to Nancy Hart and everyone who signed the letter for their commitment to fundraising for our schools. Without the work that they do, there are many programs that wouldn't be supported. So I'm very appreciative of their work, and I hope that we can get a resolution tonight. I know they're kind of chomping at the bit, getting ready to fundraise for this year, so we can let them get organized and get started on their projects.
And I hope when we come back to look at the policy, it can be a group effort, because we have a group right here that is actively involved in every detail of fundraising that, not everybody is. So they would have some good recommendations and suggestions and stuff. So I would hope that we'd work kind of together. I don't know what that would look like, but when we get this fine-tuned.
So are we comfortable with prizes could be rewarded at a class size or larger? I mean, so they may do grade.
Yes.
It may be a grade level prize, but at a minimum, it could be a class level prize. Is that clear enough for you, Dr. Cook?
That's clear enough.
Okay. Perfect. And then do you, I don't know if you know what your Spark plan is for this school year, but as you get Spark fired back up and maybe you guys talk about it, then we can revisit this in a month or two and kind of figure out how do we want to address this policy over the course of the coming school year. So by the time summer hits, we've made our changes and it's real clear going into next school year where we're at or where we're heading. Okay.
Unless we wind up with limitations on how often and how we can meet, that shouldn't be a challenge at all.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's just kind of wrap up here before we do. Just a couple items I want to bring to your attention. One is we have a special workshop scheduled. We've been doing those on Zoom or doing them on person. This is to consider categorical levels, so I don't know if we want to do that in Zoom next week or if we want to do that in person. So that's an 11:30 meeting next Monday.
Will we have Panhandle here for that meeting, Dr. Cook? Do we know?
We will, yes.
It would be nice maybe to be able to ask questions in person if that's not too cumbersome for staff. I think it's a big meeting.
They are unnoticed. I don't know. I think we noticed it as a Zoom invite to them, but we can.
Yeah.
We
actually are, at least on our calendar, it says in person. I don't know if they all say that, but it says Midtown, at least for meeting location.
I would.
So why don't we plan on in person?
I would just note that that there's a possibility for medical reasons that some may attend virtually. So.
Okay. So we'll be in person on that one, and then we may have some folks join in via Zoom. And I'm sure we could work it out if one of us needs to, we could Zoom in as well. So that's 11:30 next Monday. And then as you may recall, we've met every Monday, except for last Monday, for the last 6-7 weeks. And those, we put those as a standing meeting. Those end next Monday. And Ms. Town had asked me earlier today about those meetings and whether we wanted to continue. My suggestion was that we continue for at least a little bit. We have some items in all the planning that we've kind of let fall behind. One is goal and evaluation stuff that we typically do in September, and we're going to be hard pressed to get that done. But we need to work on that. We had, I believe Ms. Town has a board handbook, a draft that she's working on that she'd like to bring to us. So we could spend some time talking about that. And
I'd lift up e-school at some point here, given that we have a brand new school, too, that started today.
Yeah.
So a workshop on that at some point.
So I'd like to see us just keep those Monday kind of middays, and we can do them as Zooms if that's easier for people on most topics, I think. The evaluation one we probably want to do in person at least, and maybe the handbook one too, so we can put our hands on it and see what Ms. Town's been working on. So. Okay, so are we good with keeping those for a little while? We'll keep them an hour and try to keep that really tight just to respect all of our time and admin's time and keep going on.
I know we had mentioned getting reorganized about kind of 3 things that we put on hold last year: boundaries, schedules, and graduation requirements. Do we want to?
Yes, that's on our October agenda for the regular meeting to have a discussion on that. Is that right, Ms. Town? I think at the last meeting we talked about having on this, but being the first day of school, we decided to kind of push it. The October meeting's only 3 weeks away because we're meeting so late this month. Kind of admin didn't quite have time to prepare on all that.
And maybe Chair Morrisroe, we need to just take a moment. I know that when I saw the bus, I woke up this morning and opened up my windows and saw a bus go down the street. And I almost started to cry out of celebration and joy to see a bus. So I would like to say, Dr. Cook, well done getting us here. Thanks to your team. They put in the hours this summer repeatedly to get us to this day. And what a joy it was to see kids drive by on the bus. So to the IT teams that have been going above and beyond, and to parents, I guess I would say today, it was the first day. For some, it was definitely the first day in my household. So summer was yesterday, school was today. There might have been tears, but thank you for getting us there.
Thank you, Trustee Smith. That's very kind of you.
All right. Well, good work, everybody. We'll see you next Monday. Only 4 hours shorter than the last one, I think, or 3 hours shorter than the last one. So we'll get out of here. Meeting adjourned.